Coming up on Christian World News, as the world anxiously watches North Korea, many are praying for the rogue regime. Meet one Christian who fled the country but longs to go back and preach to her people.
Plus, millions mourn the death of ex-Muslim turned Christian evangelist Nabil Qureshi. Hear his final message to the world.
And a man is devastated by the sudden death of his wife. See why he packed his bags and hiked 2,000 miles to meet God on the Appalachian Trail.
여러분 안녕하십니까? 크리스천 월드뉴스입니다. 북한과 미국의 긴장 관계가 고조되면서 전 세계의 불안감도 커지고 있습니다. 트럼프 미 대통령은 새로운 대북 독자 제재 행정명령에 서명을 했고 이에 맞서 김정은 노동당 위원장은 태평양상에서 역대급 수소탄 시험을 하게 될 것이라고 위협했습니다. 한편 북한은 기독교인에게 가장 위험한 국가로 알려져 있기도 한데요. 바로 이곳의 지하교회에서 탈출한 한 사람이 있습니다. 김은진 씨의 이야기, 오늘의 첫 소식으로 만나보시죠.
Her name is Kim Yoo-jin, age 31. She was born in Pyongyang, North Korea. Kim's testimony is rare considering the numbers on North Korea. The CIA estimates that some 24 million people live in the communist country, and the best guess is about 2%, or 480,000, are Christians. Just a handful of them have escaped from the brutal regime and lived to tell their story. Kim Yoo-jin is one of them.
Growing up, I was told by the authorities that there was no God in this world. We were ordered instead to worship Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, the leaders of the country.
Freedom of religion is guaranteed under North Korea's constitution, but it's never encouraged. What was it like being a believer in North Korea?
We met every Saturday evening. My family gathered in the back room of our small apartment. We had to be very quiet. We whispered when we prayed, sang songs, or read the Bible. We often covered our heads to muffle the noise.
Growing up, she heard stories of how her city, Pyongyang, was once known as the Jerusalem of the East. In 1945, 13% of the population was Christian. The city was the center of Christianity on the Korean peninsula. Half a century later, Kim's faith made her a target.
My parents often asked me to stay outside the apartment on Saturdays to make sure no one was coming while the family prayed inside. We couldn't allow anyone to know what was going on.
Over time, the meetings grew to include a few friends and extended family.
We had one Bible in the house. My grandmother, who was a believer from the Japanese imperial times, had a Chinese Bible. She translated the Bible by hand into the Korean language on pieces of paper. That's how we read the Bible. We found strength in those pages.
But soon the authorities discovered that her father was a secret believer.
My father was a tailor in town, and the police suspected something was going on. We believed they planted listening devices in his shop and on his clothes.
In 1994, the authorities discovered that Miss Kim's father was operating an underground church in North Korea. So they raided the home, arrested him along with an uncle. Both men probably ended up in one of the 6 labor camps in North Korea. Do you remember that day?
The day my father was arrested, I was at school, but I'll never forget that day. He hugged me before I left for school, and like every other day, he reminded me to be careful. Every morning at the breakfast table, he would tell us that one day the government will come and arrest us for being Christians. He warned us of the price we would someday pay for our faith. I remember him saying often that even if I face death, I will follow Jesus.
Some 200,000 prisoners are being held in political prison camps in North Korea. An estimated 30,000 of them are Christians. The regime is routinely cited for human rights violations. Won Jae-chun is a professor of law in South Korea.
They were treated as a criminals, and especially like a terrorist, and they are prosecuted based on national security crime of North Korea.
This video, obtained by CBN News, reportedly shows the execution of North Korean Christians. think that your father is alive today?
No. Everyone knows what happens when government agents arrest Christians in North Korea. They never make it out alive. I know my father is in heaven. And he's praying for North Korea and my family.
Kim's mother, grandmother, and siblings managed to escape that day to the mountains. In 2005, with the help of a Chinese pastor, she crossed the Tumen River and defected to China. Her family followed months later.
It was a difficult decision. I knew that if I got caught, I'd be arrested and sent to a prison camp. But my family defected because we were being persecuted in North Korea for our faith.
Today she's married and has a baby boy.
I am very proud of what she did. Her family has gone through a lot over the years. She's a hero in my eyes.
Kim is quick to brush aside those compliments, instead giving honor to the man who laid down his life.
I grew up in a land where they said there was no God. But my father told me otherwise. He loved Christ, and for that, he died.
She has a dream to one day go back to Pyongyang and share about this love with the people of North Korea.
이슬람에서 기독교로 개종한 전도자 나빌 쿠레시가 오랜 위암 투병 끝에 하나님 품에 안겼습니다.
Qureshi was born and raised in the U.S. to a devout Pakistani Muslim family. Before the age of 5, he had already read through the entire Quran and could recite several chapters by memory. Eventually, after having several prophetic dreams and studying the Bible in college, he turned to Christ. He earned several degrees in Christian apologetics and became a world-renowned evangelist through Ravi Zacharias' ministry. Last year, he was diagnosed with an aggressive form of stomach cancer. While the cancer may have taken away his life, Qureshi hopes his message lives on.
As you consider my ministry, I hope it leaves a legacy of love, of peace, of truth, of caring for one another. That's my hope and my purpose behind this.
우크라이나에서는 종교개혁 500주년을 기념하기 위해 15만 명 이상의 사람들이 한자리에 모였다고 합니다.
People came from all over the country to pray and thank God for the freedom to worship. The event featured a host of family-friendly events. Attendees enjoyed exhibits, play zones, and musical performances. They also heard from politicians, religious leaders, and international speakers, including Nick Vujicki and CBN's own Terry Meeuwsen.
And we are gathered here tonight because of the courage and determination of one man 500 years ago to make a difference. God is not looking for men and women of power and wealth. He's looking for people who are looking for Him.
We thank you, God.
Ми дякуємо тобі, Боже,
that you hear our prayers.
що ти чуєш наші молитви.
Father, all the prayer requests
Боже, всі ці молитовні
that
потреби,
have been written or not written.
які були написані.
이번에는 카리브해가 허리케인 마리아의 공격을 받았습니다.
Maria raked Puerto Rico as a Category 4 storm, knocking out power on the entire island and killing more than a dozen people. Before that, it devastated the island of Dominica, including the Prime Minister's home. Federal emergency agencies and relief groups are mobilizing to bring relief to those islands.
멕시코에서는 또다시 지진이 발생해 나라 전체가 마비됐다는 소식이 전해져 왔습니다. 건물이 무너지고 약 300명이 사망했는데요. 멕시코 주민들은 CBN 재난구호팀과 함께 재건을 위해 애쓰고 있다고 합니다. 멕시코시티에서 전합니다.
Smartphones captured the first moments after the tragedy. People looking for survivors in Jojutla, Morelos, a city close to the epicenter of the earthquake.
How can it be possible that people that I have known for years are not with us anymore? We just could not help them all.
While people waited for authorities to decide if it was safe for them to go to their homes, many thank God for those who risked their lives helping others.
A neighbor from the business next door kicked the door down because my wife and my 2 children couldn't get out.
What used to be a convenience store is now a building about to collapse. They are closing this area for safety. We met a family willing to do anything they can to save at least a little something of their belongings.
Nadia took a deep breath when her husband attempted to salvage their belongings.
Tratando de sacar lo más que pueda. He's trying to get as much as he can. Our room is intact, but my sister's room collapsed. We had to kick the door down to get out.
The building where they used to live might collapse at any time. Nadia realized that inside the house after she captured this video on a smartphone. Now, like many others, she is forced to leave. 87 miles away in Mexico City, authorities and volunteers work tirelessly, digging and proving. They listen attentively for faint voices and signs of life beneath the rubble of this school. Abimelech and his brother were among those rescued from the school. We met him as CBN Humanitarian and Disaster Relief brought food to the hospital for people waiting to hear news about their loved ones. Many people were injured in the earthquake, and some are still missing. Abimelech asked one of our volunteers to pray for his brother, who was still in intensive care. And the greatest need that Mexico might have right now, more than tools, volunteers, and food, is prayer. For CBN News, Esteban Castro, Mexico City.
에팔레치아 산맥은 정상까지 오르는 사람이 4명 중에 1명에 그칠 정도로 오르기 힘든 산 중에 하나로 꼽히는데요. 하나님과의 만남을 기대하며 3,318km라는 여정에 첫 걸음을 내디딘 한 사람이 있습니다. 함께 만나보시죠.
Paul Stutzman lived a great life, happily married, 3 children, and a great job managing a large restaurant in Ohio's Amish country. Then, in 2002, doctors diagnosed his beloved wife, Mary, with breast cancer. Although they did everything they could and believed God would heal her, Mary passed away 4 years later. This devastated Paul, leaving him consumed with a burning question for God.
Where were you when my wife died?
A year after Mary's death, and still with no answer, Paul knew he had to do something different.
And I just felt God saying, it's time, give it up, go on the trail, and I'm going to meet you there.
So Paul quit his job and started his journey on the famous Appalachian Trail, nearly 2,200 miles of rugged wilderness that begins in Springer Mountain, Georgia, and passes through 14 states, ending in Mount Katahdin, Maine.
What was going through your mind those nights in the shelter?
The first night on the Appalachian Trail, I'm in my tent, and I'm laying there. I can't sleep because it's raining, and I just gave up a good job to be out here in the woods getting rained on. And so I just sort of reflected back on my life and how I'd grown up. And I just told God that night, you're going to be my hiking partner, and I want to know I want answers, and I want to know more about grace.
How long did the journey take you?
I had planned on 6 months, but growing up the way I did, Amish and then Mennonite, we have a strong work ethic. And so I'd get up early in the morning and I just hike all day. And I ended up doing it in 4.5 months, which is pretty fast.
What did you average every day on the trail?
My average on the whole hike was 17.5 miles a day, but that includes 8 days where I took a 0 day, which means a day off.
Everybody on the trail has a trail name. What was your trail name?
I picked the trail name Apostle. And I took that name. Obviously, my name is Paul, so I was the Apostle Paul. And 500 miles up the trail is Damascus, Virginia. So I was the Apostle Paul heading to Damascus.
What was your favorite state?
I enjoyed Virginia especially. Virginia is the longest state of the states, probably about 600 miles. But it's not quite as difficult as perhaps like Georgia or New Hampshire and Maine. But the scenery coming over the Shenandoah National Park, the scenery is just gorgeous in Virginia.
During his first month on the trail, Paul lost 30 pounds and got in the best shape of his life.
But the average person burns 2,000 calories a day. A hiker on the Appalachian Trail would burn 6,000. So you can't eat enough. And so about once a week, I'd hitchhike into town because I had food boxes sent to me about every 100 miles. So I'd go to a post office and get my food box. And then since I'm in town, I go to a restaurant and hopefully they have a buffet because, you can just eat and eat and eat and eat. And then get a motel room and get a shower. And a shower and a warm bed is such a luxury after you've been out in the woods for 10 nights, sleeping in a tent and in a sleeping bag.
Paul, how did walking in the woods day after day, sleeping in shelters, getting rained on, going hungry sometimes, how did all that help you heal after your wife died?
I was exhausted. My body was exhausted, but my mind was becoming very sharp and in focus. And as the farther I would hike and the more tired I got, the more clear my mind became. And I started seeing a purpose in what God was doing as I'm meeting people.
Day after day, Paul cried out to God. Then, on a Sunday morning, somewhere in New Hampshire, he finally got his answer.
He took me on my face in tears when he revealed to me why I was on this trail. And God said, "You're writing a book, put this message in the book."
While it wasn't the personal message he was hoping and expecting, Paul saw it as a word for everyone. Jesus is coming back.
What I heard was that I had to take your wife to get you out here in this mountainside to hear that message. And tell people that I am coming back. I am in control. I know what's going on.
And what would you tell to people that are maybe even now going through the loss of a spouse?
It does get better. It takes time. And with time, the healing comes. And I think it's good to know, though, grieving means we love somebody. The only way not to grieve is not to love. Our loved ones want us to go on with life. You know, they've got it made. They're in heaven. They're just having a ball. But they want us to enjoy life. And there's a lot to enjoy.
And you actually thought about what would be on your tombstone at the end of your life.
Would I just wanted to say I worked all of my life at a restaurant and passed away? Or would I wanted to say he took a chance, he took a risk, and he quit his job, and he hiked the Appalachian Trail? And I decided I wanted to read that way.
Wendy Griffith, CBN News.
우버 택시를 아십니까? 스마트폰 어플을 통해 승객과 차량을 이어주는 서비스인데요. 많은 이들이 돈을 벌기 위해 우버를 운전하지만 뉴욕에는 한 영혼을 하나님께 인도하기 위해 우버를 운전하는 사람이 있다고 하네요.
Hi, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Beautiful day in New York.
Kenneth Drayton drives for Uber in New York City. It's a part-time job that lets him practice his full-time calling.
Any believer, any spirit-filled believer, their number one priority is a commitment to the mission of God and to the purpose of God on a daily basis.
Kenneth says he's always been involved in ministry and hadn't really considered this other line of work.
My oldest son said, why don't you try Uber? You know, it's pretty decent income, it's a pretty decent amount of money. And at the time I said, well, you know, I don't know. But then I looked into it, and then what it required in New York City is you need a TLC license, taxi limousine commission. And it was kind of an expensive process. But then one day I was eating in a buffet in Brooklyn, and a voice, I encountered it in a voice that just said to me, go and get your TLC license. And it was clear, it was loud, and I looked around to see if anyone else in the buffet heard that. And it stood up in me. And I said, okay. I perceive that this is the voice of the Lord speaking to me. So I obeyed.
After a year behind the wheel, he's pretty sure it was divinely appointed.
Many of them coming in and out of my car was perplexed, had issues, had concerns. And for some reason, I perceived that a lot of these individuals God was sending to me.
From the time a passenger slides into Drayton's back seat to the moment he drops them off, he says the Holy Spirit is present and guiding the conversation.
It's an awareness. It's an inner ear. It's wisdom, most of all. The Bible makes that clear also, that he that wins souls is wise.
Kenneth has no agenda other than obeying God. Sometimes that means talking to passengers. Sometimes that means staying silent. Either way, he trusts that the true winner of souls is at work.
God has many people working in the vineyards. So some water, Some plants the seed, and depending on what the need is that God sees fit, and the Holy Spirit will determine how that seed grows.
Kenneth doesn't expect to be an Uber driver forever, but as of now, he hasn't been called to anything else.
I don't think Uber is the main focus. I think the main focus is God's divine will.
Caitlin Burke, CBN News, New York City.
오늘 준비한 소식은 여기까지입니다. 저는 다음 주에 다시 찾아오겠습니다. 시청해주신 여러분 고맙습니다.